Previously on the Craft Parenting Podcast. Liquor licenses are back. Alcohol content is down, and the number of saloons in town has decreased dramatically. Has the Brewery Association done enough to hold off Prohibition? Stay tuned to find out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Craft Parenting Podcast, a podcast about two Cincinnati craft beer lovers with a parenting problem.
I'd say it's like mild at the moment. It's gotten better.
It's pretty mild.
Yeah.
But super exciting fun times. We have new equipment.
We do. We have the fancy board with the fancy things, and it's shiny.
It is very shiny. Hopefully it's working.
Uh-oh. Who gave you that button?
We have buttons. We have...
Oh, man. I like that button. Keep that button for the dad jokes. Note where button is. Got it.
We have a board.
I figured out how to use the board.
And hopefully it's working because it says it is. And everything is on, so that's good.
If I have to record this episode again, I'm going to be very unhappy. Oh, man. Focus.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Joe Ludwig, and with me is my lovely wife and co-host, Caroline. How's it going, Caroline?
It's going pretty good. On the last episode of this series, I was drinking a beer that was 10.15%. I am now drinking a beer that's 10.4%. So things are getting better.
And what series is that? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about Prohibition in Cincinnati, the road leading up to it, actual Prohibition in Cincinnati, and then recovery from said Prohibition, or the Dark Ages, as I like to call it.
So this is part 2 of our 5-part trilogy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, where the 5th part, we are both replaced by younger and more hotter versions of ourselves.
Okay. I didn't know I was going to be replaced. I did not sign up for that.
This is me informing you that we're just going to be replaced.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have another great show planned out for you, as you said. This is going to be all about the Cincinnati beer scene right up to and during Prohibition. Is that right?
That is right.
So I learned a lot last time, and I expect to learn some more this time. And where did all these factoids come from?
So most of this information came from Cincinnati Beer by Michael D. Morgan, who is a local author, and he's pretty awesome. He's been on the Gnarly Gnomes podcast, Cincy Brewcast, which is how I learned about this book.
Okay. And is there a particular chapter?
This week, we are covering...
One eternity later.
Okay.
So what chapter is this from in this book?
In this book, today we're mostly talking about dark beers make a comeback and the sheriff gets into the beer business.
Interesting.
It is.
We'll talk about that shortly, but first, we both have some adult beverages in front of us.
Yes, we do.
So, Caroline, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Bière de Noël by Westside Brewing. It is 10.4 ABV and 30 IBU. So, this is a Belgian-style dark spiced ale. And the description is, a special treat for the holidays, this Belgian-style winter ale is a deep ruby color with a tan head. Fruity esters from the Belgian yeast bring to mind aromas of plums and bubblegum while playing nicely with the spices used in the brew kettle. Full-bodied and finishing on the sweeter side, this hearty ale is definitely a fireside sipper. I would like to be up by a fire while I sip this. So I'm going to need you to make that happen.
Well, if we were to go outside, we would be blown away. Quite literally, as there's quite a bit of wind.
Yeah, I need to check on our garbage cans, but I also don't feel like checking on our garbage cans. It's fine. It's fine. So what are you drinking? I notice yours looks darker than mine, but also looks lighter.
You're drinking from a can.
Yeah. So your beer looks darker than mine, but it also looks like it's a lower ABV.
Oh, I see. Okay. I am also drinking a beer from Westside Brewing. Westside Beside.
Westside Beside.
That could be a button.
That could be a button. I say lots of things that could be buttons.
Let's see. It is 5.8% ABV and 45 IBUs. And the description is deep brown, bordering on black. This porter boasts a malty aroma filled with chocolate notes and a hint of roast. Malt sweetness pairs with flavors of baker's chocolate and lightly piney hops for a smooth, full-body drink with just enough bitterness to keep it balanced. Pretty sure I had this on the podcast before.
I'm pretty sure you have to.
It's delicious.
My beer is pretty gosh darn tasty too. And I'm going to get so much better at pronouncing words as I quickly drink through the whole thing. Because this is a 16-ounce can. So this is a pint. I am enjoying it.
All right, so now that we got that covered and everyone knows what we're drinking, now it is time for Caroline to get on her soapbox and tell everyone what is bugging her in children's TV. So what is bugging you in children's TV?
So overall, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Donald the Duck, is a very problematic character. Now, children should see all different kinds of people and all different emotions from people.
You've ranted about Donald Duck before.
I have. But specifically, we're going to talk about the episode where Mickey and Donald are going to help Mrs. Claus rescue Santa.
Okay. I am intrigued.
Because apparently Santa is stuck at the top of Mistletoe Mountain, but Mrs. Claus was able to get to him with one of his reindeer or leave with one of his reindeer and get to the clubhouse gang where they're making their Christmas lists because they're telling Santa what they want for Christmas. But Donald is struggling with this because his list is like 30 miles long. Like, I think one of the things he asks for is a washing machine. Okay, I'm all about responsibility, but you're asking Santa for 20 other things. It's either like the washing machine and like maybe one other thing, like a pair of clothes, or nothing, because it's washing machine. So Donald's going on and on about how he has to finish his Christmas list, but also it's Christmas Eve. So you should have had this done by now. The elves have already placed all of the orders. Like, elves ain't going to make anything tonight. They're on a break. They get to, this is their one night of the year where they don't have to do anything. Santa does everything. So Donald's all like, no, I can't help. I have to finish my Christmas list. And Mrs. Claus is like, if you're not good, Donald, you won't get any presents. And so, the whole episode, Donald is being a little brat. It's like, well, if you're not good, Donald, you won't get any presents. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then he continues to be a brat. It is not setting a good example for my daughter. And then at the end of the episode, they've helped Santa. They know the Santa call, which is Santa, Santa, ho, 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 which I now get stuck in my head anytime we talk about Santa. Thank you, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, for that. And everybody gets their presents except for Donald. And Donald's like, but where's my presents? It's like, aw, Donald, we have your presents. And he gets 30 presents. But everybody else got one. That is rewarding bad behavior. Don't do that. It's not instilling good values into my daughter. And son, because now Elliot super watches Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He actually sits still.
He does, and he was dancing. He was trying to dance. And he does this thing where he tries to clap, but he like touches his wrist.
He claps the back of his hand. Like that's what
Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, he doesn't clap palm to palm. He claps palm to back of hand.
It looks like he's trying to do the more sign.
He might be.
But he's trying to clap.
He's so cute. I don't care.
Yeah, it's really cute because Lily at this age was also like trying to dance.
If Elmo, Cookie Monster, or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse ever says, murder your parents, we're screwed.
Well.
It's a good thing they don't promote violence on those shows. But they do promote bratty behavior.
Wow. I don't know what their intention. Maybe they thought that Donald repented.
He did not. Nothing about him seems sincere.
Like from the writers, maybe they thought. Or maybe they don't want him to repent because he's Donald Duck.
I mean,
and he's always a hothead.
I'm just not a fan.
We didn't even talk about last weekend. Are we talking about last weekend? The Super Bowl.
Oh, we can. Hey, they played a good game until like the last 3 minutes, and they kept it close and they kept it interesting. My goal was not a shutout, and it was not a shutout.
That's a pretty low bar.
I mean, I'm still used to saying bungles because they usually bungle things up.
Which they did.
Which they did in like the last 3 minutes. They needed to call some timeouts, get the players to cool their heads a bit, and then get back out there. Instead, they just kept going and going and going and getting more and more frustrated, which did not help the situation.
No. So the Bengals lost, but here's to next year. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, last year we only won 4 games. This year we went to the freaking Super Bowl.
Well, we'll see what happens. It's a young team.
It is a young team, and now they know how far they can get, and they won it.
Joe Burrow was hurt.
Yeah.
And he played through it, apparently.
Hopefully that doesn't bite him in the butt.
Yeah. They say he doesn't need surgery.
That's good. But know your limits, people. As I tell my coworkers, you're no good to me dead. Take that rest. Eat some food.
You would tell your coworkers that.
It's true.
All right. So now on to the main topic of this week's episode, where we are talking about the Temperance Movement.
No, you didn't say that right, Joe. The Temperance Movement. A flighty fad, or can they get things done?
I'm intrigued.
I had lots of fun writing this.
I'm intrigued. Do tell.
So, going back in time.
Do it again.
Now, going back in time. Oh man, we have sound cues now. Maine was the first state to enact a statewide alcohol ban in 1851. More states followed soon thereafter, but an increase in German and Irish immigrants to the United States and Reconstruction after the Civil War put the temperance movement on the back burner. The Anti-Saloon League and Women's Christian Temperance Union were in it for the long game and slowly worked their way through around 30 states before countrywide prohibition was brought to law.
Jesus drank wine.
He turned water into wine. That's like one of my favorite memes where it's like a guy is holding a glass of water and he's like, I'm going to have water tonight. And then it pans back to the glass and it's wine. And he's like, damn it, Jesus. Guess I'm drinking wine again. So in Ohio, a law passed in 1908 giving counties the choice of whether they wanted to remain wet or go dry. And 62 out of the total 88 counties decided to go dry, which is about 70% of Ohio. Not necessarily population-wise, but more like landmass-wise. Most of these counties were rural and not near large cities that were still very wet. And then in 1914, statewide prohibition was put on the ballot again and was narrowly defeated. Hamilton County had most of the votes against prohibition, but they could only hold off a statewide ban for so long. I mean, honestly, Hamilton County can only carry Ohio so far. May 26th of 1919 was a very sad day because Ohio voted for statewide prohibition. Oh my goodness. I'm about to take that board away from you. And so statewide prohibition was to be implemented January 16th of 1920. It was predicted that about 1,000 saloons would go out of business, 8,000 greater Cincinnati employees would lose their jobs, and that Cincinnati would, quote, face the most serious financial situation in its history. Breweries then had to determine how they wanted to handle statewide prohibition on their own. The Christian Moorline Brewing Company had already attempted to make near beer, non-alcoholic beer called Moorlow, and it went terribly. In the fall of 1919, they started selling off brewing supplies and equipment, including the pipes used to connect all of their equipment together. And once all of that was sold, they began selling their buildings. The Christian Moorline Brewing Company was no more, but the family was able to keep the majority of their fortune bowing out of the beer game early. Other breweries decided to go into related businesses, renting out their space to food-related businesses, and while they were no longer brewing, they were able to keep the lights on. Yuengling made ice cream. Yeah, I didn't hear much of Cincinnati companies like making ice cream, but like they would rent out their space to other food-related industries because all of their equipment was able to be sanitized and stuff. So it was good for that environment. But yeah, since Christian Moorline had already attempted to do an non-alcoholic beer and it went terribly, they're like, this ain't keeping the lights on. Let's just peace out and hope that we can at least keep the company together, even if we no longer have a business. So unfortunately, some businesses did not take it as well. William Boss, who was the owner of Gambrinus Stock Brewing Company, worried himself crazy about the family business becoming illegal, and he had a failed suicide attempt.
Oh my.
It was bad. They said he was like going around the brewery because it was like St. Patrick's Day. He was going around the brewery acting all like happy and like super excited with everybody, and then wrote a suicide note and went into his office and attempted to off himself and failed.
Oh my God.
He went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so while his suicide attempt may have failed and he lived on, the company soon went under after trying to make a near beer that did not sell well. Surprise, surprise. So in my beer tasting class that I took in college, the first beer that our professor had us try was O'Doul's. Because he said, I need you guys to taste how important alcohol is to beer. So we're going to try this beer that has very little to no alcohol in it. And then we'll try a very low percentage beer so you can kind of taste the differences between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like theoretically, they should have the same flavor profile, but alcohol really helps. Not because it messes you up. It just helps the taste flavor. Taste and flavor mean the same thing, but I've had beer. So Hootapole Brewing Company, Heron Court Brewing Company, and Jackson Brewing Company all went down with the fight. After agents came in from out of state in November of 1920 to investigate still open breweries, all were found to be making beer over 0.5%, which is what the law said you could not brew beer more potent than. All of the breweries were seized, and none of them had been making a beer over 3%. So pre-prohibition, breweries had been making beer that was 7%, and then they all decided to lower their alcohol content to 4% to try to help fight off the temperance movement and say, hey, look, we're making things better. Like, this beer isn't going to mess you up as fast. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But now this all beer was under 3%. And what, Bud Light's like 2.8?
No, Bud Light is like 4.
Oh, yeah. No, 2.8 is what the new percentage was. Is that like Utah I'm thinking of? No, that's what our parents could drink when they were 18.
2-3 beer is what
2-3 beer. That's what I'm thinking of. So these companies were faced with heavy fines for tax revenue for manufacturing illegal strength beer. Because, I mean, the government wanted to be able to tax them on this higher alcohol content. That's what they were really concerned about. But all of these companies were able to settle out of court, and no one from the breweries went to jail. Because that was an option. But nobody wanted to go there yet. But then things began to get worse for breweries that violated the Volstead Act. And not everyone was lucky enough to just get fines.
The Volstead Act, was that Prohibition?
Yes, the Volstead Act was Prohibition.
It was an amendment, though, right?
It was an amendment to the Constitution, but it was also called the Volstead Act.
Oh, interesting.
So the Shaler Brewing Company was facing bankruptcy, and the company had a court-appointed receiver to help turn a profit. Because, the bank wanted their money. So the receiver decided the company should make a better near beer. This near beer would be darker, maltier, and have a 4% alcohol content.
This was the court-appointed? What?
He did not tell the courts what he was doing. He was just the guy that was told to have this company make money. I think he was also told to not do anything illegal. But then they went and did things that were illegal. So when selling kegs to saloons, the only way the saloon owners knew which beer was which was by a wink from the delivery driver and a higher keg cost. And Shaler Brewing Company did end up turning a profit.
Imagine that.
And were eventually determined they did not need a receiver anymore to help control the business. But all of that happened after the company was raided by the feds. Because, oh hey, we're making illegal beer. What? No, it's just maltier and darker and it tastes better. It's not more alcoholic. I don't know what you're talking about. So the jig was up. The company may be profitable, but 3 of the people involved were facing jail time and fines. The fines were easy enough to pay with the money they had been skimming off the business, but all of the people involved ended up going to jail. The commissioner at the time, Roy A. Haynes, was happy with the verdict since, quote, the enforcement of the 18th Amendment here in Cincinnati is constantly improving.
Screw that guy.
I know.
Where's his grave?
I don't know, but we should go pour a beer out on it.
I wasn't going to go that far.
We could do like a Bud Light. Still violates the Volstead Act. I think we've got one in the fridge left over from Elliot's birthday party.
We do.
So, since jail time was now officially on the table and was being used, other local breweries who were probably doing something similar to what the Shaler Brewing Company was doing decided to stop brewing actual beer for a bit. Hootapole quit making illegal strength beer and managed to stay afloat by selling soft drinks and malt extract. So, fun fact that I forget where I learned now, but it was recently. Oh, it was on my Have a Drink podcast.
On the
Have a Drink podcast, where they were talking about mixed mocktails.
Is that still a thing? Or did they stop?
The podcast or mocktails?
No, the podcast.
The podcast is still a thing. They took a break for a hot second, but now they're back. So soft drinks are called soft drinks because at the time, Coca-Cola was made by a fermentation process, but they would stop the fermentation process before it got over 0.5% alcohol. So it was a soft drink. And a hard drink would be like beer or liquor. So like a hard liquor. But then with modern technology and stuff, we didn't have to do that anymore.
High fructose corn syrup and sugar.
Yeah.
Fake
Enforced
sugar.
carbonation. So Hootapole was selling soft drinks and malt extract. The malt extract may or may not have contained a recipe to make good beer using the contents. They actually had who was it? It was a Prohibition agent who reported them because he was like, I bought this malt extract and the malt extract told me how to make beer with it. It's like, well, yeah, but that's fine because they are not actually making the beer. Mohawk Brewing Company, though, was not as straight as Hootapole ended up becoming. They attempted to survive on near beer alone, but when that didn't pan out, they started bribing law enforcement and having runners distribute their beer. Because that's totally legal in all of the ways. They were raided in 1925, and while the beer was only 2.5%, it was still well over the legal limit. Public officials, which included the Hamilton County Sheriff, also faced criminal charges, which was one of the first times this was seen in Cincinnati. Ultimately, the sheriff was found not guilty because corruption was a thing and the city loved him, but there were lots of people who testified against him. So it was super corruption as to why he was not sentenced with jail time and managed to keep his job, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
I mean, this is all a short period of time, too. This is less than a decade. Across the river in Kentucky, there were surprisingly few arrests in Kenton and Campbell counties, though beer was still flowing freely. Wiedemann Brewing was still making full-strength beer late into the 1920s. I mean, you're going to do what you're going to do. It's what we know. In 1927, a Wiedemann Brewery delivery van was seized by federal agents and 4% beer was found inside. President Charles Wiedemann was 72 at the time and declared by his physician unfit to stand trial. His son and Vice President Carl Wiedemann was fit for trial, but failed to show up for his court date. After looking for Carl all around Newport, he was finally located in a saloon, drunk. Because that's how you want to show up to court when you're being accused of making actual beer at your company. He ended up going to a federal penitentiary for 2 years, but his father was spared jail time. And they did not tell his mom. It was either his mom or his grandma. All of this was hidden from her. I want to say it was his mom if his dad was 72. Yo, none of this is happening. Don't worry about it.
Interesting. It's so silly. I mean, I guess they passed an amendment or whatever. But that's the thing about the amendment process. You need 2/3 of all states to...
Yeah, a 2/3 majority.
To 2/3 majority.
To ratify.
But there's no time limit.
No.
So if they started on an amendment in the 1700s or whatever, the 1800s, that's still on the books.
Yeah.
So
what was interesting about the Wiedemann family was that in an oral history of events, George Remus, who was in fact a personal friend of Carl's, oversaw the distribution aspects of Wiedemann's illicit beer sales. But this kind of doesn't float with the fact that he was in jail or in court for bootlegging between January of 1924 and April of 1927. So his involvement would have been probably pretty slim, but he could have had people on his payroll that were involved.
This is the older Wiedemann?
This is the younger Wiedemann.
Oh, gotcha.
The younger Wiedemann was like a party boy. He won his fortune on a horse, like a racehorse, and then lost his fortune on that same racehorse.
Live hard, die hard.
Go to jail for 2 years. It is what it is. So I do need to finish the book that I have in the basement about George Remus so we can do a thing about him. Because right now we're just talking about breweries in relation to Prohibition. But Remus, man, he was his own thing.
He was the biggest bootlegger in the country, right?
Yeah.
Or one of them. And he was right here in Cincinnati, in Price Hill.
He was. And he lived a very colorful life. Started off doing things illegally and then eventually got straight. He started off as a pharmacist when he was too young to actually be a pharmacist.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, but then, once he was old enough, actually, passed his exams and shit. I need to read that book. It's a good book. And then eventually give it to your mom. Because I think the book is signed to your mom.
Okay, well, let's continue with the Temperance Movement.
So, the last big scandal in Cincinnati during Prohibition was in late 1928 with Jackson Brewing. Again. This time, a brewmaster, 2 Cincinnati lawyers, and the state of Ohio's acting treasurer were all charged with conspiracy to bribe a Prohibition agent. Even though Jackson Brewing was facing most of the charges, it was believed that multiple breweries were in on the bribing. Because in exchange for $300 a week, the breweries would get advance notice on raids to hide their good beer. Unfortunately, the treasurer ended up in jail, as did the brewmaster and one of the lawyers. They were not as lucky as the sheriff.
I guess not.
Or as bribey as the sheriff? Corrupt? I don't know. You fill in the blank as you see fit. So, while a lot of breweries weren't really making beer anymore, some of them were probably still making beer. It's in the first part of the series where he said, What? Breweries are saying one thing and doing another? Why would companies ever do that? Well, when the tax man comes a-knockin'.
They had an entire industry on Prohibition.
Yes.
Like you said, that there was a Prohibition agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing there was a agency within the government.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a whole business. Like this was a stream of revenue for the government.
It was. So we'll get into that in a second. I wasn't going to talk numbers, but we'll talk numbers. So to summarize, Prohibition did what it set out to do. Americans drank 70% less during prohibitions, and breweries and distilleries were decimated. But organized crime and corruption were everywhere. People became criminals overnight, and drinking patterns became very unhealthy. Because it's not like I could go down the street to a saloon. I'd have to kind of sneak over to a place, and then I just get blackout drunk. Versus I'm going to have a few drinks a night for a week. I'm going to have all my drinks in 2 nights. Not good drinking patterns. So alcoholic consumption was down for generations, and it wasn't until the 1970s that drinking got back to pre-prohibition levels and then dipped back down again. So, the Temperance Movement did what they sought out to do. Drinking went down. Now, was all of the drinking that was still around healthy drinking? No, not even close. Were there a bunch more criminals out there? Yes, a ton.
Wait. So how do they know drinking went down?
It's
official drinking, I guess.
I mean, at this point, it's all going to be estimates. I mean, especially after the fact when it's not illegal anymore, you'll be more likely to get decent data.
Big companies in the city couldn't operate necessarily unless they bribed people.
Yeah.
But Joe Schmo in the country, he can brew all he wants.
Those country counties were more likely to be yo, we don't want it. No alcohol. Now,
he's brewing on his own.
Were the hills alive with stills? Probably. That's what I would do. But that's just me. So, getting into numbers before I do my closeout questions. Because he gets kind of snarky in the last paragraph of this chapter. So, the U.S. government has spent about $140 million on trying to get rid of alcohol with all of their prohibition agents and stuff like that.
140 million in 10 years?
Yes.
Or per year?
In 10 years.
Holy
but
moly.
So they spent 140 million. They collected 460 million in fines. So they made over $300 million.
And I'm guessing those are official fines, not bribes.
Correct. That doesn't even include because the government doesn't see bribes. See, that's the thing. When we talked about this last episode, they decided that, okay, to try to get rid of these businesses, we're going to say you can't tax or regulate them. Well, in saying that I can't tax them, I no longer have that tax revenue coming in. But I can't tax black market things. I mean, the IRS tries to by saying that you need to include any income from stealing or selling illegal items.
I saw that.
That's been a thing for forever. Taxman wants his money. There's a reason why lots of people get caught for tax fraud versus other reasons. Because tax fraud is the easier thing usually to get to stick. But then he gets super snarky and says that the war on drugs we spend $500 billion a year on. And there are tons of people in jail and very little progress that has been made. So the war on drugs wishes that it was prohibition. Because then it would be moderately successful. I mean, really, if you want to regulate something, instead of making it illegal, just make it taxable. Because the IRS will find everything.
Well, if we go to digital money, then yes.
Yeah.
They will find everything.
So, in closing, most Cincinnati breweries were closed or struggling at the end of Prohibition. So would Cincinnati be able to bounce back as a thriving beer city? Would these historic breweries come back to be lost forever? Stay tuned. Well, no, find out in the next part of this 5-part trilogy. 6 seasons and a movie. 6 seasons and a movie. We has the buttons.
So now it is time for Joe's dad joke.
No. Me.
Okay.
It's time for me. I talked this whole show. I'm going to keep talking through the whole show.
All right.
I will not let you have your own segment. It's all about me.
All right. So, Caroline, do you have a dad joke?
I do. So, Joe, what is the fastest growing country in the world?
What?
Ireland.
Why is that?
Because it's Dublin.
Nice. You got lucky.
I did. I knew it wasn't the middle button. The middle button is for when you tell dad jokes.
All right, I guess that's it, huh?
That is all that I have in the doc for this week. Did you learn something new?
Yeah, I did. I learned that Cincinnati likes its alcohol.
We do.
Well, that does it for this week's show. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us at Craft Parenting Podcast on these platforms. You can also get a hold of us via email, which is craftparentingpodcast@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. Make sure to share the show. It is what helps our show grow. If you would like to send us stuff such as fan mail, craft supplies, or sanity, we have a P.O. box.
And all of this information is available on our website, which is www.craftparentingpodcast.com.
That's where we post the show notes. Plus, we've been writing more blog posts about some of the stuff that doesn't make it in the podcast. Are you wondering where our week in review is? It's on the blog now. It's on the cloud. It's in the interwebs.
Yes, it is. And I recently wrote a summary of our recent adventure to Wiedemann Brewing.
Which was featured in this podcast episode.
Different brewery. Different owner.
Different owners. Same beer-ish.
They probably wouldn't like it if we talked about that. And we connected the dots, so thank you for that.
It's history.
And with that, I'm Joe.
And I'm Caroline.
See you next time on the Craft Parenting Podcast.
Buttons.
We are recording.
Oh, snap. Don't hit pause. Never hit pause. That's when bad things happen. I am drinking about... I said I'm drinking about... Scroll, scroll, scroll. Page, page, page. Where is it? Oh. So, we are mostly talking about the chapter, Why Somebody Had to Make a Law Against It.
That's what we talked about last week.
Oh, dang it.
Right?
It is Liquid Breadlines is the start of next time. Pages. So many pages. Actually, The description is Belgium-style dark spiced ale. A special treat for the holidays. This Belgium-style winter ale is a ruby. I need to read it off the thing. Fruity esters from. Don't do it. Editing Joe. I love you. You're my favorite.